The Science of Learning Research Centre's PEN principles start with PEN principle number 1, written text and spoken word do not mix. Under the heading of psychology, they say dichotic listening means that we can only pay attention to one person speaking at a time. Reading and speaking produces the same neural conflict. Under education, it talks about text-based information presented during a lecture can impair performance. And neuroscientifically, listening and reading occupy the same neural real estate. The conflict reduces the processing of any specific information. So the additional questions we can answer here are, can taking notes improve or hinder a student's retention? And when can note-taking lead to better outcomes? Studies by Rahmani and Sedeghi and Chang and Ku in 2011 and 14 respectively have concluded that taking notes in a lecture results in better performance outcomes than not taking notes. And while this sounds like a simple thing to implement in vet classrooms, there are a number of things to consider. Firstly, the action of encoding thoughts into words and pictures requires effort rather than just passively attending to the content. As we already know from the PEN principles, greater effort when recalling information can lead to better long-term memory. But does this work in every situation? Secondly, evidence suggests that the quantity of notes directly correlates to better performance in assessments. But what if the classroom requires attention to, say, a demonstration? And how much is the right amount? Thirdly, collaborating with others to compare and contrast notes also improves performance. But isn't this dependent on the quality of the notes taken? And the time taken between taking the notes and the collaboration? And the simple fact that students are participating in basic active recall? Fourthly, much research concludes that handwritten notes are better than digital notes taken, say, on a laptop or smartphone. This includes writing with a stylus on a tablet. But 2021 research by Professor Michelle Miller disputes this and says there is simply not enough data to apply this conclusion for all learning contexts. And lastly, notes reflect what the student found interesting, or at least what caught their attention. While this can be useful for a trainer who may wish to, say, fill in the blanks, there are limitations on the trainer's involvement with individual students. So let's start with how we as trainers can help students avoid some of the downfalls of note-taking that can lead to poorer outcomes. Keeping to a systematic note-taking method has shown great results when compared to students who have no standard approach to the way that they record key information from your sessions. The three we will run through here are Cornell notes, skeleton notes, and diagrammatic notes. Now, these are methods that already exist and have been used for some time. They are as much for the students as they are for you as the trainer. The goal here is to improve retention. Each technique will require some effort on your behalf, say to prepare templates and instruct students on how to use them for their benefit. Let's start with the first one listed here, Cornell notes. Firstly, on some note paper, divide your paper up into 3 areas. There's a cue area, notes area, and summary area. Each of these areas can be used individually or collectively to not just take notes, but ask questions and summarize what you've learned within the day. I've linked to a video from Cornell University below on exactly how to use this particular technique. Take a moment now to pause this video so you can go to the Cornell YouTube channel and have a look at exactly how to use these notes properly. In the next video, we'll be deep diving into the use of images, but for now, it's important to acknowledge that visual cues improve retention. Pre-drawn diagrams or text boxes allow students to take notes in context. This is known as guided note-taking or skeleton notes. Skeleton notes are partial session note handouts and are a tool used by many instructors to maintain student engagement throughout a class period. Skeleton notes are an interactive tool in the sense that even though they are not like a cooperative learner group activity, they maintain the focus of the learners and keep them active in an intellectual dialogue with the instructor as they complete the notes as the session progresses. Some instructors make a partial version of their PowerPoint slides. Other instructors use course packets and handouts. Typically, only pieces of the content are included in the skeleton notes. This technique is especially useful in large enrollment courses, although many instructors use this technique in smaller courses as well. Professor Susan Mitchell-Reynolds suggests that guided notes are particularly useful in engineering-type courses. Handouts can be graphical, colourful, and interspersed with humour for further student engagement. To take things on a slightly different tangent from guided note-taking, some students prefer to use diagrammatic notes. These are a visual representation of the key points of information that the student interprets and how each point connects to further ideas, existing knowledge, or even questions that may arise from each point. This can be represented as a spider diagram, a tree diagram, or even a flowchart. From a neuroscientific perspective, diagrammatic notes expound how single areas of the brain don't operate in a vacuum. They connect to others in complicated neural networks, so that learners can put different information together. So indeed, they are visual representations of how the student connects the information they're hearing or seeing. When it comes to quantity of notes, there is no research currently that defines exactly the right amount of notes to take in any given situation. Obviously, the variables include handwriting speed, typing speed, ability to switch tasks between watching, hearing, and writing, and much more. Some students report that 1 page per 15 minutes is good for them, whereas others would find that way too distracting. Also, if you adopt a more diagrammatical way of taking notes, then quantity isn't as important as the connections you make between key topics. Now onto a topic that's a little controversial. A 2012 study stated that the effects of the method of note-taking and note-taking context were examined to determine if handwriting or typing notes and whether a lecture context or a textbook reading context influenced retention. The results demonstrated that there was a significant effect for typing notes and that they produced higher retention scores than handwriting notes. The results also indicated that there was an interaction between the method of note-taking and the context where the lowest scores were achieved where participants handwrote notes during a session. In total, these findings suggest that typing as a method of note-taking may be an influential factor in memory retention when, say, summarizing a textbook. Research by Canter, Greenberg, and Walker in 2017 concluded that handwritten notes may be more powerful than digital notes, though digital notes can be fine-tuned. Professor Michelle Miller in 2021 is not so convinced. It may be a case that digital note-taking is evolving quickly with the advent of stylus note-taking on tablets and the improved digital literacy of younger trainees. But as recently as March 2021, a study out of Tokyo University found that handwriting on paper versus tablets and smartphones recorded greater brain activity during an fMRI scan. The brain activity included stimulation of the hippocampus, a region of the brain that's essential for long-term memory. So at this stage of the research, we still haven't seen studies that focus on more than 2 or 3 different contexts. So what is our takeaway, and how should we then guide our students? Firstly, overall, taking notes improves retention over not taking notes. Keeping notes organised improves performance in assessment and overall long-term retention. Increasing cognitive load by even a small amount through handwritten or typed note-taking improves retention. Encourage your students to adopt a note-taking strategy. And finally, provide pauses between key points for students to take notes. And while there is a correlation between quantity and outcome, the quality of the notes and what students do with them is just as important.